No one could have predicted the storm that was coming, not the producers, not the fans, and definitely not Charlie Day. What started as a night of laughter turned into a nightmare, a single joke, a misunderstood moment, and an audience that turned cold in seconds. By the end of it, Charlie wasn't just embarrassed, he was humiliated. Living stage in front of the world, and what he did next left everyone speechless. The lights in the studio were brighter than usual. The energy in the room was electric, fans packed. The audience clapping, cheering, holding signs with Charlie's name written in both English and Russian. The camera zoomed in as the announcer called his name and Charlie Day walked onto the stage with that familiar awkward grin. The crowd erupted. He waved, did a little bow, and gave Jimmy Kimmel a big warm hug before taking his seat. The two had known each other for years, and tonight was supposed to be a relaxed, funny night full of laughs, stories, and international fan appreciation, especially from his Russian fan base. Charlie had been gaining a massive following in Russia over the past few years thanks to his offbeat humor, his wild expressions, and his unfiltered personality. He had even done a few interviews with Russian media and once tried speaking Russian in a promotional clip which, despite being completely wrong, had gone viral. Fans loved it. They thought it was charming, hilarious, and totally Charlie. But tonight, something about that moment was going to come back in a way he didn't expect. As the show kicked off, Jimmy started the segment with some jokes about the usual celebrity gossip, politics, and sports before turning his attention to Charlie. He praised him for his recent movie, which had done surprisingly well in Eastern Europe, especially Russia, and mentioned the sudden spike in Russian fans that had flooded Charlie's social media. Charlie laughed and nodded, saying how grateful he was and how he found Russian humor sharp and intense, just like he liked. Yet the audience laughed along. A few Russian fans in the crowd cheered in their native language and Charlie gave a little wave to them. Everything was flowing smoothly. The jokes, the stories, even the little embarrassing moment when Jimmy brought up a photo of Charlie falling asleep on a flight, all good-natured fun. Then Jimmy leaned in with a grin and said he had a little surprise for Charlie, something the fans would love, something from his Russian adventures. Charlie looked curious, even excited. The screen behind them lit up and started playing a clip from a Russian talk show appearance Charlie had done a year ago. In the video, Charlie was trying to greet the host in Russian but completely butchered the words, mixing up phrases and accidentally saying something that loosely translated to "I eat goats" instead of "I'm excited to be here." The host had burst out laughing, and so had the audience. Back then, it was harmless. It had gone viral for being cute and funny, but watching it now with the loud laughter echoing from the live audience, Charlie's smile began to fade. Jimmy was laughing hard, slapping the desk, saying how that clip never got old. The studio audience joined in, laughing even harder, and someone in the crowd shouted something in Russian which made the front row crack up even more. Charlie forced a chuckle, but his eyes didn't match his smile. He adjusted his jacket, shifted in his seat, and quietly said, "Yeah, that one haunts me." Jimmy didn't notice the tone and continued the bit, saying maybe Charlie should do another attempt live tonight, that maybe his Russian fans in the crowd could help him out. It was meant to be playful, but it felt like a push. Charlie tried to play along, but his voice too was flatter. He muttered something in broken Russian again, and the crowd roared with laughter even louder than before, only this time it didn't feel supportive. It felt like they were laughing at him, not with him. Someone in the crowd mimicked his mispronunciation out loud, and the camera accidentally caught Charlie's expression as he blinked slowly, looked at the floor, and let out a tight breath. The atmosphere shifted just slightly, but enough to notice. Jimmy, sensing the change, tried to pivot, asking about Charlie's upcoming tour, but the damage had been done. Charlie gave short answers, nodded, and smiled politely, but his body was stiff. His fingers clenched slightly on the armrest of the chair, and that twinkle in his eye was gone. His mind wasn't on the conversation anymore. It was looping that laughter, replaying that clip, and hearing that voice from the crowd that mocked him in front of millions backstage. The crew noticed the shift in mood. His manager, watching the monitor, frowned and tapped his phone nervously. Something wasn't right. The camera panned wide, showing both Jimmy and Charlie on stage, but it was clear something was off. Charlie wasn't present. He was spiraling inward, and Jimmy was too caught up in the show to see it. Yet the audience still clapped, still laughed, but attention had crept in like a crack in a glass screen, invisible from afar but ready to shatter under pressure. And that pressure was just starting to build as Jimmy tried to steer the show back into safer waters. His voice grew a bit more animated, trying to pump energy back into the segment, but Charlie Day just sat there, smiling out of habit, not out of joy. His hands were clasped tightly on his lap, and his foot tapped rapidly against the floor like a drumbeat of silent frustration. Jimmy then made the move that tipped the night over the edge. He smiled, looked toward the crowd, and said maybe Charlie should give a thank you speech to his Russian fans right here, right now, but in Russian, just for the laughs. The crowd immediately cheered, expecting more broken words, more cute mistakes, more fuel for internet memes. Charlie let out a small awkward laugh and said, "Really, man, you want me to do this now?" Jimmy nodded, grinning wide. "You've got this, buddy. Let's give the fans what they want." Charlie looked at the crowd, then at the camera, then back at Jimmy, and for a second something flickered behind his eyes, like a storm cloud quietly rolling in. He hesitated, but finally gave in. He slowly leaned toward the mic and began speaking in broken, hesitant Russian, trying to say thank you for all your support, but the words came out, twisted, jumbled, and wrong, and almost instantly the audience burst out laughing again, this time louder than ever. Someone in the back shouted a translation and suddenly half the room gasped, and then laughed harder. Jimmy leaned in and said, "What did he say?" And someone in the front yelled out, "He said I eat old women." Jimmy's eyes went wide and he burst out laughing, hitting the table with his hand. Charlie's face froze. He blinked and turned to Jimmy, his jaw tightening just slightly. Jimmy, still laughing, repeated the line, "I eat old women, Charlie. It's going to be a meme by midnight." And at that moment something broke, something shifted, something inside Charlie cracked under the weight of mockery that didn't feel funny anymore. The crowd kept laughing and clapping and Jimmy kept joking, but Charlie didn't respond. His hands slowly unclasped. He looked down at the floor and let the silence hang for a beat. Then he looked up and said, "Rio, quiet, do you think this is funny?" Jimmy paused, the grin still halfway on his face, not sure where this was going. The crowd chuckled nervously. Charlie continued, "Do you think it's cool to drag someone on live TV when they're just trying to connect with people in a different culture?" Jimmy tried to defuse it by saying, "Come on, man, it's all in good fun, you know. We love you." Charlie waved a hand, not angrily but slowly, like brushing away dust from his face. He said, "I get it. I do. People love to laugh at the guy who messes up the language, right? It's harmless, right? But maybe, just maybe, I'm tired of being the joke every time I try to do something outside my lane. Maybe, just maybe, I want to be taken seriously for once." The room went quiet, the audience unsure if this was still part of the bit or something real. Jimmy sat up straighter, eyes searching Charlie's face for a sign of irony, but there was none. Charlie wasn't laughing, he wasn't acting, he was standing up slowly, his mic brushing against his jacket, the sound echoing slightly in the now silent studio. The crew in the back had stopped moving. The director whispered in someone's earpiece, asking what was happening. Charlie stood there, hands at his sides, his eyes scanning the crowd, the same fans who had flown in from Russia to support him, now laughing at his expense. He nodded slowly and said, "I appreciate the fans, I do, but I'm not a clown. Not tonight, not anymore." He turned to Jimmy and added, "I thought this would be fun, but this was just cheap, man, real cheap." Jimmy looked stunned, his mouth opening to speak, but nothing came out. Charlie didn't wait for a response. He walked off the stage, his steps slow but firm, no drama, no yelling, just a quiet walk of someone who had finally had enough. The camera followed him awkwardly before cutting back to Jimmy, who tried to laugh it off, saying, "Okay folks, I guess that's Charlie's way of saying goodbye." But the room wasn't laughing anymore. What had started as a night of celebration had shifted into something raw, something uncomfortable, and the internet wasn't going to miss a second of it. Clips were already being recorded, screenshotted, uploaded within minutes of Charlie's walk. The headlines were writing themselves. Charlie Day snaps on live TV, walks off after Russian joke, humiliation. What no one realized yet was how much deeper this moment went for Charlie and how far the ripples would spread in the hours that followed. The second Charlie disappeared behind the curtain, the entire energy of the studio imploded like someone had pulled the plug on a party mid-song. Backstage crew froze, staring at each other, unsure whether to chase him, stop him, or let him go. Someone called out to a producer, another whispered into a headset asking, "Should we cut to commercial?" But it was live and the delay was minimal, so Jimmy Kimmel had to keep talking, pretending everything was fine, though his eyes kept glancing off stage as if hoping Charlie might turn around and come back, but he didn't. Charlie walked straight through the hallway, past the crew, past the dressing rooms, past confused assistants who called out his name. He didn't respond. He moved like a man underwater, every step slow, heavy, full of weight. His face was unreadable, eyes locked forward, fists clenched slightly like he was trying to hold something in the air, was thick back. Then, not just with awkwardness but with the sound of nothing, no claps, no laughs, just whispers and uncertainty inside his dressing room. Charlie finally stopped, closed the door, leaned back against it, and exhaled. Long and shaky, he stared at the floor, breathing hard, trying to make sense of what had just happened. What was supposed to be a moment of connection had turned into a stage for humiliation. He didn't mind being laughed at when it was playful, when it was fair, but this felt cruel, not from the fans, not even from Jimmy necessarily, but from the way the thing was orchestrated, as if his attempt to show respect to another culture was just raw material for content. His manager knocked softly from outside and called his name. Charlie didn't answer. Another knock, this time firmer. He finally said, "Give me a second," voice hoarse and low. His manager stepped back, gave him space, but the tension was growing fast. Everyone backstage was panicking. Someone from the network was already asking questions. Someone else was trying to reach his publicist. Jimmy, meanwhile, was back on stage, fumbling through a joke, trying to lighten the mood. But his rhythm was gone, his charm falling flat without his guest. Across from him, the crowd didn't know whether to laugh or stay quiet. Some chuckled awkwardly, others shifted in their seats. The Russian fans who had been cheering just minutes ago now looked concerned, whispering among themselves, wondering if they were the reason everything had gone wrong. Social media was already on fire. Clips of the awkward Russian joke moment were everywhere, with captions like "Charlie Day humiliated on live TV" and "Kimmel crosses the line with fan mockery" trending. Tags exploded within minutes. Charlie's name was everywhere. People were arguing online, some saying he overreacted, others defending him, calling out the uncomfortable way humor turned into mockery. The debate was heating up and Charlie hadn't even left the building yet inside the dressing room. He finally sat down on the couch, ran his hands through his hair, and stared at his phone. It was blowing up: texts from friends, messages from other celebrities, people asking if he was okay, fans reaching out with support, and others just sending the clip over and over again with laughing emojis. He tossed the phone onto the floor, leaned back and closed his eyes. His manager finally came in, gently closed the door and said, "What do you want to do?" Charlie looked up, face flushed, eyes tired. He said, "I don't know, man. I didn't come here to be a punchline, not tonight." "Not like that." His manager nodded quietly, said they could leave now. No press, no statement, just walk out and deal with the mess later. Charlie stood up, paced the room and said, "It's not just about tonight, it's about how this keeps happening every time I try to show something deeper about myself. It gets flattened into a joke." His manager tried to reassure him, said, "Maybe Jimmy didn't mean it that way. Maybe the audience was just reacting how they thought they were supposed to." But Charlie shook his head, not angry, not yelling, just disappointed, the kind of disappointment that cuts deeper than rage. He said, "When people laugh at a mistake, that's fine. When they laugh at someone trying, that's different." Outside the door, security had quietly assembled, making sure no reporters slipped in, no photos leaked from behind the scenes. Charlie took one last look at the mirror, adjusted his jacket, grabbed his bag and said, "Let's go." The manager asked if he wanted to say goodbye to Jimmy or anyone, but Charlie just walked past him, didn't look back, didn't slow down, just kept moving down the hall, past the cameras, past the crew, past the lights that once felt warm and now just felt like interrogation lamps. The door to the alley opened with a loud metal creak and Charlie stepped into the night, cold air hitting his face like reality crashing down. He didn't stop walking, not for the fans, not for the paparazzi, not even for the show that was still on air, trying desperately to recover behind him, because in that moment Charlie Day wasn't thinking about TV or fame or headlines. He was just a man who had been laughed at one too many times and finally decided not to take it anymore. The moment Charlie Day walked off that stage, the internet detonated within seconds. The clip of the awkward Russian language joke had been screen recorded from 5 different angles. Fans and the audience had already posted raw footage, some of them even zooming in on Charlie's face as he tried to force a smile and failed. The hashtags exploded. Charlie to walk off, Kimmel humiliation. Russian fans backlash instantly trended in the US and then globally as the internet tore itself in half over what had happened. Some fans defended Charlie, immediately calling the moment cruel and unnecessary, saying Jimmy pushed too hard and that the audience turned the whole thing into a mockery that went too far. Others mocked Charlie for being sensitive, accusing him of overreacting on live TV and being unable to take a joke. It wasn't just random users either. Celebrities started weighing in, comedians, actors, even foreign media personalities. A Russian TV anchor posted a tweet in support of Charlie, saying his attempt to speak our language was sweet and respectful. We loved him for it. Shame on the crowd for turning on him, and shame on the show for exploiting that moment. Others reposted older clips of Charlie trying to engage with international fans, videos of him thanking people in Spanish, French, even Japanese, now being reframed as proof that he always tried to connect, that he didn't deserve this news. Outlets picked up the story within minutes. Headlines like "Charlie Day walks off after Kimmel joke goes too far" and "Late night disaster humiliates Hollywood star" began flooding entertainment feeds. Jimmy's team issued a brief statement claiming the segment was meant to be lighthearted and that Charlie was always welcome on the show, but it sounded hollow. Even as they tried to smooth things over, fans noticed the lack of an apology or even acknowledgement that something had gone wrong. Back in Charlie's hotel room, there was no peace. His phone kept buzzing non-stop with notifications, texts, missed calls, social media pings. His publicist had already called twice asking for a statement or at least a tweet to clarify that he was okay, but Charlie just stared at the screen blankly. He didn't want to clarify anything, didn't want to explain. If himself didn't want to be part of the circus anymore. His friends started calling to people he hadn't heard from in months, some asking if he was alright, others saying, "Hey man, I saw the clip, you good?" Some pretending to joke about it, trying to keep it light. Charlie ignored most of them. He didn't want sympathy, he didn't want damage control, he wanted to breathe too. Process, to understand how something so small turned into something so ugly. Meanwhile, Russian fan pages began defending him fiercely, translating his older interviews, reposting his broken but heartfelt Russian greetings, and calling out the live audience for betraying the very person they came to celebrate on. Reddit, a thread blew up analyzing frame by frame the shift in Charlie's mood the moment his eyes dropped. The second he stopped laughing, users debated whether Jimmy had gone too far or if Charlie was just too sensitive, but the consensus leaned toward one truth: it didn't feel right. Charlie's team huddled late into the night trying to figure out next steps. His agent suggested a follow-up interview, maybe a sit-down on another show to reclaim the narrative, maybe even lean into the vulnerability and speak about the challenges of being a public figure. But Charlie just sat at the edge of the bed staring at the floor until finally he said, "I'm not doing any of that, not right now." He wasn't angry anymore, not in the explosive shouting way people expected. He was quiet, drained, reflective, thinking not just about that one joke, but about every time he had tried to bring something deeper to his comedy, something emotional, something meaningful, and watched it get flattened by a punchline. That night news shows replayed the clip over and over, anchors calling it the most uncomfortable live TV moment of the year. Late night talk shows even made jokes about it, adding layers to the fire without realizing they were pouring gasoline on something already burning. Fans kept arguing, posts kept flooding, and somewhere in the noise was the actual man at the center of it, sitting alone in a hotel room with his phone face down and his heart a little heavier than before. He opened his laptop, briefly scrolled through some comments, saw the mix of support and mockery, saw the memes and reactions, and somewhere in the chaos saw one comment that stood out, simple and direct, written in Russian with an English translation underneath it. Read, "You tried to speak our language and we laughed at you, but please know we love you anyway. You didn't fail. We didn't fail, we did." Charlie stared at it for a long time, then quietly closed the laptop, leaned back on the bed, and let the silence speak for a while, because in that moment he realized this wasn't just about a joke or a walk-off or a show. This was about something deeper, something that every performer faces when the laughter they love turns into something they fear, and they're left wondering if the world still sees the person behind the performance. The next morning, New York City was buzzing with media. Trucks parked outside the network building, reporters shouting questions into cold microphones, hoping to catch even a glimpse of Charlie Day, but he never showed up. He had checked out of his hotel just after sunrise. No press, no handlers, no entourage, just Charlie wearing sunglasses and a hoodie, pulling his suitcase quietly through the back door and disappearing into the early morning traffic. Jimmy Kimmel's team was still scrambling, meetings being held every hour, statements being rewritten, legal reviewing every moment of the episode. The network was caught in a PR storm, and Charlie's silence was only making it worse because the world was waiting for a reaction. A tweet, a clip, a rant, something to feed the machine, but it never came. Instead, what followed was something even more powerful than any viral response. 3 days passed. No interviews, no tweets, no damage control. Charlie had gone dark completely, and that silence created a vacuum. People filled it with speculation. Some said he was quitting show business, others said he was spiraling. But then quietly, with no warning, a video appeared on Charlie's rarely used YouTube channel. No title, just a black screen and soft ambient music playing underneath, and then his voice. No fancy production, no studio, just Charlie speaking into a mic alone. He began by saying he hadn't planned to speak, but sometimes silence says things. People twist, and maybe it was time to explain, not the incident, not the show, but the feeling behind it. He spoke slowly, honestly, without bitterness. He said, "I've spent my whole life making people laugh, and I love it. I still love it, but every comedian has a line, not a line others cross, but a line they draw inside themselves, a line that says, hey, this part of me is real. Please don't turn this part into a joke." He didn't name Jimmy. He didn't insult the crowd. He didn't blame the fans. Instead, he thanked the Russian fans who had sent love messages, translations, old videos, and told him they never meant to hurt him. He said the moment hurt, but not because people laughed, but because he felt like he had failed to connect, failed to be understood. He said comedy is built on risk, and that sometimes the risk backfires, but he'd rather keep trying and keep failing than stop trying altogether. The video ended with him saying, "I'm not done. I'm just figuring out how to be funny without breaking the parts of myself I need to keep whole." The video went viral within hours. Millions watched it. Fans cried, critics applauded, and even fellow comedians who usually mocked emotional moments stepped back and showed respect. Something about the tone, the simplicity, the truth in Charlie's voice struck a chord that no scripted apology ever could. Jimmy Kimmel finally responded a day later. On his show, taking a more serious tone than usual, he apologized directly, saying, "Maybe I went too far. Maybe I missed the moment where the joke stopped landing, and I'm sorry for that. Charlie's always welcome here, and I hope we can laugh together again someday." The apology was met with mixed reactions. Some thought it was sincere, others said it was just PR cleanup, but Charlie never commented on it. He didn't need to, because he had already said what he needed to say, and the world had heard it loud and clear. In the weeks that followed, Charlie returned to work, not to talk shows or red carpets, but to the thing he loved most: writing, creating, directing. He started developing a small independent project about miscommunication, about cultural disconnects, and about humor that wounds and heals at the same time. And for the first time in a long while, he felt in control, not of the narrative, not of the internet, but of himself. The Russian fanbase stayed loyal, even stronger than before. They started a campaign called We Hear You Charlie, posting heartfelt videos, letters, and artwork as a tribute to his effort to connect, to be vulnerable, to be real. And suddenly what began as humiliation turned into something far more powerful. It became a reminder of the thin line between mockery and admiration, and how quickly that line can be crossed without meaning to. Charlie didn't walk off to make a statement. He walked off to protect a part of himself that had been laughed at too long, and when the world tried to turn that into another punchline, he answered not with anger, not with revenge, but with truth, and in that truth he found something rare in show business, something more valuable than applause. He found respect, and maybe that was the loudest laugh of all, the one that comes after the silence when the world finally listens. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you even a little, if you felt the weight behind the laughter and saw the human behind the headlines, then don't forget to like, share, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Be back with more real moments, more truth behind the fame, and more voices that deserve to be heard. And till next time, take care of your heart, and remember, sometimes walking away is the bravest thing you can do.